is the second webinar in our Circular Procurement Virtual Series 2020, official side event of the World Circular Economy Forum 2020. For those of you who had able to join us in our first webinar 2 weeks ago, we talked about buying change. And of course, this webinar is really focused on using procurement as a tool to advance and accelerate to a circular economy. This particular, the second webinar is about selling change. So we can't have circular systems or circular buyers without circular vendors and suppliers. So we're really going to focusing on the selling aspects and some of these companies who are coming up with very, very innovative circular business models and also circular business products. So with that, before we launch into the speakers, I just wanted to go through and introduce our organization for those of you who are unfamiliar with us or haven't had the chance to work with us as yet. Talk a little bit about, why procurement as a key mechanism to advancing the circular economy, and then launch into some of the very work that we're doing on the ground to advance this particular agenda. So we'll go to the next slide. So for those of you who have had some history with us, we are, of course, initially the Recycling Council of Ontario, and we are most known for, of course, the work we did on extended producer responsibility and public-private sharing of responsibility of waste focused originally in the early 80s. And we've evolved and advanced as an organization throughout the last 45 years, working on all kinds of things, not just focused on recycling and end-of-life management actually, but looking at spanning the entire value and supply chains to go more upstream as it relates to actually preventing waste and all of the benefits that are accrued through that. We're unique in the sense that we have a membership that represents the entire value and supply chain, and so really have a strong market understanding of what motivates market players to really be focused on environmental benefit and historically waste reduction. But we do work in policy advocacy. We create a lot of resources and services, and of course offer those through our pilot projects, research, and programs as well. Next slide. So most recently, we have been excited by this global conversation that's been started about a circular economy and all of the benefits that come with it. And so we've been sort of elevating our organization's mandate and expanding our work really with the circular economic advancements in sight. And we really are excited about its opportunities to look more system-wide as opposed to just the end of pipe or end of life management of materials, looking at different systems, different innovative products design that actually look more at value of materials than just end of life management and its particular costs or environmental impact. So the system change that is denoted by circular economy is really where we have now transitioned our focus, and as a result we have opened a new organization, a sister organization to the RCO called the Circular Innovations Council. The intent is to have both exist for a period of time and then fully evolve to have a broad Circular Innovations Council looking at a broader mandate both jurisdictionally, so outside of Ontario, but of course looking at more systems beyond end-of-life management. Next slide. So when we think about the differences between linear and circular, we're still all really students of really understanding the basic differences. But for me, the core differences really come at looking at the economic based models. We've heard a lot about sustainable procurement, and certainly the term sustainability has been one that has been used for decades. And really, the difference between better understanding circularity as a system is sort of understanding that we've been trying to interject or intersect, if you will, sustainable solutions in an existing linear economy. But in a circular economy, we're actually designing the economic models with restorative and regenerative in mind, aiming to keep products, components, and materials at their highest utility and value. So it's really redefining value and creating an economic model or system that derives value in everything that we produce and we consume, looking at that full systems approach. So not just trying to find parts in our linear economy where we intersect sustainable practices, but restoring a new system altogether. Next slide. As it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals that the circular economy modeling can actually deliver on, we always keep these in sight. And as it relates to procurement, procurement as a tool can actually deliver on these 4 UN sustainable goals in particular. So this is, again, one of those principles and that we want to look back on all of the activities that we undertake as an organization. Next slide. The circular economic model and systems that we have been supporting and trying to bridge activities or intelligence on or experiences in other jurisdictions really have the capacity to deliver on environment, economic, and social benefits, in some cases simultaneously. And so sort of going back to the comparison between linear and interjecting sustainable and really more circular, often when we think about sustainable procurement or sustainable activities, we think about prioritizing potentially environmental over economic or social over economic. But what we're learning about circular business models and systems and designs, that they can, if done right, they can deliver on all 3 of these benefits. So you don't really have to choose between them, but they in fact can be delivered simultaneously in some cases. So again, just re-emphasizing the real trifecta, I guess, of benefits that can be brought forward in a circular model that really, from our perspective, excites the opportunity. Next slide. So in addition to delivering on social, economic, and environmental, we know that circular procurement in particular has the ability to provide real-time influences very directly. So really, when we talk about transitioning markets, incenting that market by changing your requirements in purchasing really, is a very direct and very expedient way in accelerating our change to a circular economy. We know that it can be utilized in all kinds of different applications, whether it varies. Its applicability in terms of the size of the market, the type of product, the type of systems you're looking for, even jurisdictionally. So procurement is one of those tools that, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, you can leverage it through your supply chains or through your vendors and suppliers, and you actually can do it. You can shift those markets with or without a legislative changes. We know that changing regulation to shift markets is very cumbersome, it's very time consuming, and it's not always, we don't always get our desired effect. But when you shift markets, pull behaviors by using your buying power, it's more direct. And so that's why procurement, we feel, is a very critical tool in accelerating the pace. Certainly, we know that there are opportunities in both the public and the private sector. We're going to outline some of the opportunities or the buying power of governments in particular in the public sector. But we also know that corporations are making their own commitments to transitioning to circular business models and supporting circular supply chains, and they're driving those requirements in their supply chains. They actually also have, same as government, an indirect and sometimes direct influence on third-party organizations, and certainly they have the opportunity to influence and educate consumers. So both public sector buyers and private sector buyers have equal opportunity to drive circular procurement activities. So how to buy circular? We try to explain this when we work with either governments or the private sector through the 5 business models of circularity. So these business models effectively underpin the way that we implement or we transition from our typical linear buying to circular buying. Circular supplies, resource recovery, product life extensions, sharing platforms, and products as a service either speak to circular product design or circular purchasing systems. And so each of them can be used in some cases in tandem, they can be used individually, and we have been seeing systems where all five are in play. So we're going to bring to you today in this webinar 3 specific business models that are leveraging, in some cases, many of these platforms to drive their circular business models and are looking for their buyers to require these kinds of circular models in their requirements. Next slide. So, and when we think about the outcomes, you know, when we talk systems, we go back to this butterfly document or this butterfly graphic, which is so describes the system approach that we're taking. And if you look at the technical side of things, which is really where the mind goes as it relates to some of the reuse, repair, refurbish, and recycling sides, you know, it shows the real breadth and scope of opportunity to think about how we produce and consume products in particular much differently. But these systems design, which are integrating value back into systems, are really what we're looking for, and really the test to whether we're moving towards circularity. Next slide. So just an extend the point on these examples of business models you see in circular supplies. This is synonymous with things like materials being fully derived from renewable resources or recyclable resources. Are they biodegradable or compostable? And are those inputs derived from those kinds of activities? Resource recovery is really synonymous with recycling. So are we eliminating material leakage and maximizing economic value and returning that valued material back into systems? Product life extension, as it denotes, extending the current lifestyle of a product, either through repairability, upgradability, and reselling. So we're hoping to touch a lot about that as it relates to ICCT today, as well as in furniture as well. And then sharing platforms, given that we are living in a digital world, more so now than ever, there are exciting opportunities through sharing platforms to actually add value to an asset by sharing it amongst people. You're seeing early business models, very successful ones, and things like car sharing programs and scooter sharing programs, Airbnb, VRBO, some of these, you know, vacation or home sharing platforms. It's really about going online and sharing an asset amongst different consumers. And it's really then elevating or expanding the value of that particular asset. And we're going to hear a little bit about that in conjunction with products as a service in the lighting area that Eric will help us with today. And then as it relates to, or extended by products as a service, this is really a transformative, in my opinion. We're very used to, as consumers, owning an asset, thinking that we have to buy something and taking away a product. But really what we want is the value or the outcome that particular product affords us. And so leaving the asset and therefore the waste liability with the product designer or the product owner. So we're going to touch a little bit about, you know, what does it mean to purchase a product as a service as opposed to the product itself. So these are the 5 business models that you're going to hear from us as an organization over and over. And this is really how we are measuring circularity. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about government opportunities. We just wanted to sort of run some very critical statistics here to sort of show you the size of the opportunity. Canada's average country GDP is represented by 15% of government procurement, meaning that governments spend $2 billion a year on a national level, actually represents 15% of our country's GDP. And remarkably, 80% of that, or 160 billion of it, rests with our local governments. So our municipal combined spend power can be very, very influential. And these are annual numbers showing showing there just one of our provinces, of course, the government of Ontario being the largest purchaser, of course, of goods in the province, has a $6 billion power spend, and then on and on into the municipalities individually as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, how do governments in particular, what do they spend their money on? Where is their biggest opportunity? Next slide. We're seeing that and I talked about the $160 billion at a municipal level. You're seeing some of the early adopters as it relates to circular commitments and circular business models, becoming circular cities, if you will, and leveraging procurement as a key buyer in their community to drive the markets that they're looking for. Next slide. So we know the government of Canada is looking at using buying powers to obviously drive a low carbon economy in the country, but also most recently committed to phasing out single-use plastics and actually supporting post-consumer cycle content in the products that they buy as a government. And that will, of course, lend opportunities for the provincial governments and the municipal governments to follow suit. The City of Toronto is committed to being the first municipality in Ontario to have its own circular economy and has developed a very specific circular procurement framework. The City of Montreal and the City of Vancouver have both recognized procurement as a key impactor of their own markets and really have shown leadership in that regard. So really a lot of great Canadian municipal examples that are carving opportunity for their for not only, of course, the markets in their own cities, but for their colleagues in across the country as well. So when we look at where do governments in particular spend their money, we basically find that the top spend categories are fairly similar, irrespective of the size of the municipality or where it's located, starting with construction and infrastructure, information technology, transportation and fleet management, facility management, furniture, textiles, and food and catering. So you can see where we may have some early opportunities to drive the most impacts. And so these are the spend categories as an organization we are focused on when we're working with our municipal partners. Next slide. And so far in that work that we've been doing, we've noted a few barriers that I think our speakers will speak about today as it relates to their own experiences. There seems to be a very general lack of awareness, understanding, and an exchange between, in particular, government actors sharing, procurement opportunities to share best practice, maybe purchasing templates, RFPs, RFIs. There's no real stage or platform for municipalities to learn about using, or governments in particular, to learn about using buying power. They're kind of on their own. So we're trying to really bridge some knowledge between advancing jurisdictions and the Canadian one, but also actually to develop resources to support that transition. There's also this notion that that green procurement, sustainable procurement, and now circular procurement is really a nice to do. It's not a strategic to do. And so in that, there's a real disconnect between driving public policy objectives through buying power. Often governments think about regulating a market to deliver on the kinds of circular benefits we're all looking for. They don't think internally about how they can use their buying power to do so. And again, through the work that we're doing, we're hoping to change that. There's a lack of leadership. We're seeing that change as the cities that I noted earlier. But I think as it relates to procurement, this is not a function that tends to get a lot of support. It doesn't get a lot of play in terms of learning opportunity. And there's really a disconnect between the sustainable functions of municipalities and governments and their procurement, legal, and finance departments. And so again, one of the things we're trying to do is bridge that knowledge. And so as a result, you're not seeing a lot of engagement from the finance departments and procurement departments, which really lead this initiative. So how do we transition this? Of course, educate, educate, educate. We want to take these opportunities to talk about the circular economy, its benefits, how procurement is a key delivery mechanism to advance it. We do that, and what seems to really resonate with people is providing them with case studies of where it's done well, and measurables in terms of how it has supported these broader public policy goals in the triple bottom line, and then helping governments in particular set priority areas, either through their highest spends, their easiest to implement, or of course, the most impactful. In some cases, all three are in one. And then we have already learned from those that have done this in other jurisdictions or leading jurisdictions that engaging vendors and suppliers as partners is really critical. And we're not seeing that. In fact, there isn't this bit of a wall, I guess, so this understanding that you don't you don't speak to suppliers and partners around how you should be changing requirements that can drive market change. But for circular procurement to really take hold, it's critical that you do a lot of engagement with suppliers and vendors early on, so that you can see where the market is now and where these businesses and business models are going into the future, so you can meet that with new requirements. So for those of you who want to sort of dig into the work that we're doing, we have been invited to join the One Planet network internationally, which is quite exciting. So we are bridging knowledge and sharing information and, quite frankly, resources with organizations around the world who believe that circular procurement is critical to and a key piece to circular economic advancements. You can find our frameworks that we're starting to draft for certain municipal partners online. And we are starting to deliver workshops for municipalities who are wanting to do more, learn more, and do more. So these are offerings that we can certainly extend to anybody who's with us today that wants to learn more about how to go from sort of concepts to implementation. We're happy to all of these resources, and this information is open source. So happy to chat with you after the workshop or after the webinar today. And we are going to be opening very, very soon a new website called circularprocurement.ca. The website is an open source resource for private and public sector alike, who can come get more information and to share case studies and to learn, to connect with one another in an open platform. So we'll be pushing out information when we're prepared to open this website up. It's very, very, very full. So we know that there'll be things in it for all of you there today. So we look forward to sharing that resource with you soon. So thank you for indulging me with a little bit of introduction of the work that we're doing. Just for the markers in your calendars, we have 2 more webinars that are part of the series, one on May 30th, November 30th on Monday, November 30th, 2 weeks from today. And then another one, our final one, Measuring Success, on December 14th. So more than happy to have you part of those webinars as well. So without further ado, I want to move into our first guest speaker today. She is a longtime friend and supporter of Circular Innovation Council and RCO, so we're very, very blessed to have her back with us today. She is the head of, Frances Edmonds, is the head of Sustainable Impact at HP Canada. We would certainly be defining her as a pioneer and a champion of circular procurement in Canada. And under her leadership, HP has become one of the most sustainable tech companies in Canada in 2018. With a long career rooted in environmental health and safety, she is very passionate about environmental education and is frequently featured in the news as an expert resource for media on sustainable impact. A sought after guest, we are in any speaker series as it relates to sustainability and certainly procurement. We are very blessed to have her with us today. She's taken some time again out of her busy schedule to be with us. So without further delay, thank you very much, Frances, for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joanne, and welcome to everybody and the fellow guest speakers. I think today is going to be a fascinating discussion, so I'm looking forward to it. So why is HP here to talk to you about this stuff today? Next slide, please. As Joanne mentioned, we are Canada's most sustainable technology company, and we've broken that into 3 areas of planet, people, and community. I'm not here to really talk about HP, but what I'm trying to do is give you some confidence in the fact that we work in all areas of sustainability and have taken a very clear leadership position here in Canada, and indeed around the world, as being listed as one of the top 100 most sustainable corporations worldwide. So how do you get to be in that position? Next slide, please. Really, it comes down to being a purpose-driven company, and you're hearing a lot about that today. You know, we know that purpose-driven companies are more profitable, that they end up doing the right thing. But 80 years ago, when our company was founded, and this is Bill and Dave here seen in the HP garage, which is now an historic monument for the founding of Silicon Valley, 80 years ago, it was not the thing to be saying that the real reason you exist is to make a difference. It was actually quite heretical. So for 80 years, we've been hiring people who want to make a difference. And that's why I still work at HP after 20 years. And what that's done is led us into a strategy around sustainable impact. And this is our circular strategy. And I'm going to show you a couple more slides on this. But really, when we think about HP's business today is PC and print. Wide variety of variations on that. But if you think about these 4 elements of designing out waste, keeping materials and products in use, regenerating natural systems, and creating a low carbon future, these are things that you would want all of the companies that you chose to do business with to be doing. And the question is, why are they not? And I would argue that it is procurement that drives the linear economy. And so you as procurement professionals here on the phone today, I think you have the opportunity to really create the change that we want. And so I'm challenging you all to think about this as we go through today's session. So we actually have made the claim that we deliver the world's most sustainable PC portfolio. And that's based on EPEAT, which is an eco-label, a very comprehensive eco-label. And you have to register in each of the countries that you're selling. And we have the most registrations worldwide. And then if you look on the right-hand side, what are we doing from a printing perspective? We just announced our first carbon neutral offering with managed print services. So not only do you get better value from your printing, you now can get it as a carbon neutral service. So we've got some pretty lofty goals. And if we can go to the next slide, please. You can see here that HP has a wide variety of goals that drive the circular economy from our perspective. And obviously the one that I'm most passionate about today is the 30% post-consumer recycled plastic across our print and PC portfolio by 2025. That's coming up pretty fast. But there are lots of other goals that work into that. And one of the things I'd be asking you to look at when you go to your vendors is how broad and deep do their circular goals really go? So we've committed to taking our entire business circular. And let's have a look at the next slide, which shows you how we're going to do that. So this is very similar to the diagram that Joanne actually showed, but I'm just trying to make it a little more simple here. So the first thing is we want to make products that are maintainable and upgradable. And think about this. We're in a commoditized marketplace. We sell against companies who deliberately make their products not repairable or upgradable. And why would they do that? They're doing that because we've spent, I don't know, 100 years buying the cheapest IT products, assuming there were IT products around, buying the cheapest products, which incents the manufacturer to make a lower quality, non-repairable product for you. That's what the linear economy does. When you buy with just price, lowest price in mind, you incent the wrong behavior. So if we want to start thinking about total cost of ownership, we'll start to change that. The next thing is offering products as a service. And just as we find customers have difficulty moving to buying as a service, selling as a service also has its own complications, let's say. So it takes a lot to move into that space. We want to make products that are reusable and refurbishable. And obviously, if we still own the product after it's ended its first life and we can get it to a secondary use faster, that actually really decreases the carbon footprint. So increasing the product life of an average PC by 2 years reduces the carbon footprint by 30%. And then only once it's had a second and potentially third life do you want to bring that product back and put it into a materials recovery and reuse. And in order to do all of this, you have to design the product from the outset to go through these various cycles. I've also put a picture of a 3D printed heart there. Many people are wondering what that's doing there. It's prettier than the actual picture of the printer, to remind me to talk to you about the fact that 3D print enables all of this to happen. Our 3D printers print 70% of themselves, and they can make spare parts for anything that has a plastic part in it. Think about the repairability that enables, the shortening of supply chains through making parts just on demand. It's pretty awesome. Next slide, please. So what does some of this look like in practice? So if you're designing a product to be more repairable, what do you have to do? You have to make it modular, make it easy to repair, and eliminating these costly replacements, making service manuals freely available. Some of our competitors don't do that. And looking at how companies are getting scores for their repairability in general, not just for one particular product. It's pretty easy for any vendor to produce one hero product, as you might call it. But we're not talking about single SKUs. We're talking about moving the entire market. So my definition of sustainable procurement or circular procurement is buying the most sustainable or circular products from the most sustainable vendor. So you include both of those elements. Next slide, please. So here's an example. This is the fastest growing business to consumer play in the market, in the circular economy marketplace. It's brilliant because not only does it actually work out cheaper and better for the customer because it's more convenient, it's better for the business, it's also better for the environment. And you can see here the reductions in energy use and water and disposal just by going to a circular service. And of course, one of the things we do with this is when we ship the printer orders the ink cartridges automatically once you've signed up for the service. You're paying by the number of pages you print, not by how much ink you use. And we ship in the bag, the recycling bag. So customers are returning more of the cartridges back to us so we can put those through our closed loop circular plastics program, which is actually done here in Canada, which is pretty awesome. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we have just launched an carbon neutral managed print services, and many large municipalities and customers today are very familiar with buying print as a service. It's probably the most commonly known service out there. Less so for the device as a service or product as a service on the PC side of the house, but you get equally good gains from going to this. And I think probably the best way to think about this is many customers, when they buy PCs, don't think about what's going to happen when it reaches the end of its first life, which is kind of crazy because we all know they do. So getting it to a second use as quickly as you can really increases the chance that it's going to get a second life, and you decrease that carbon footprint that you've then bought into. So buying PC as a service is a pretty simple way to invest into the circular economy. Let's look at the next slide, which shows you some of the advantages. And we've done this. When we put data out like this, we do it using life cycle assessment, which is independently peer reviewed. So we're not making these numbers up. And I can certainly make this LCA available to you all. We compared buying a printer or a fleet of printers in this case with going with a managed print services. And you can see here the reductions that are on average happen with customers. And it's pretty cool because that's a very simple, I'm going to say very simple, it's a relatively simple thing to do, from going from owning a product to buying it as a service. And you can, just by doing that, you get these benefits. Pretty cool. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about plastics. So there isn't a Canadian who isn't concerned about plastics. Canadians have been recycling for decades, literally, and are still very concerned that, as is the federal government with the leadership they're taking, that the plastics are not finding a good home. And that's because there's no market for them, because nobody is specifying in procurement that they want post-consumer recycled plastics in their products. So HP's been taking a lot of work in this space, working with a Canadian recycler. We have been able to make plastics circular. We don't need to dig for more oil for our plastics. Today, we have a 30% post-consumer recycled content plastic goal, but we could go much higher if there was a signal in the marketplace asking vendors to do this. We couldn't do it overnight, obviously, but if there's a signal there, we will bend over backwards to delight our customers and deliver more. Most of you don't realize that the average amount of post-consumer recycled plastic in electronics today is about 2%. We could obviously do way better than that, even with a little bit. So last year, HP produced the world's first notebook, this Elite Dragonfly with ocean-bound plastics, and we just continued to roll with that. And our plastics are coming from Haiti today, where we're creating social impact with kids in school and waste pickers getting decent living wages. We just invested a $2 million wash line in Haiti, and that plastic comes directly to Montreal, is made into recycled plastic pellets, which are then put back into HP products. Next slide, please. So does using post-consumer recycled plastics actually have an environmental benefit? Absolutely. And again, these are the numbers that are done through an independently peer-reviewed life cycle assessment. It's available to you if you want to check it out. But today we're using about 1 million used drinking water bottles a day in this process in Montreal. And those are the environmental outcomes that you can get. Next slide, please. So when I look at how Canadians buy, and obviously I see a lot of RFPs, there is no pull today from the procurement end of things. Very few RFPs have ever asked for post-consumer or ocean-bound recycled content. They don't ask whether we as vendors have goals to reduce the quantities of virgin plastic used. They're not asking for transparency, or even in many cases, not even asking what happens to the stuff that they do ask us to take back, but they don't ask what happens to it. And the issue is today that recycled plastic actually costs more than virgin plastic. So any vendor who's delivering to you on the lowest price possible is not going to take up using post-consumer recycled plastics when it costs more. You have to send the signal that you want this stuff. Next slide, please. So how bad is it in public procurement in Canada? So HP funded some research. We looked at 50 public sector procurement documents in construction, IT, and large services. And these were mostly bids over $1 million, good mix of federal, provincial, and municipal, and a good mix across the country. And what you can see here is that, yeah, generally speaking, nearly 80% talk about sustainability, but less than half of them actually have anything to do with sustainability in the evaluation. Only 12% actually had sustainability included as an independent consideration, and none of them had any meaningful consideration. So we have huge opportunity to make a difference and an impact here. Even with small movement, we could really make a change and create that pull in the market. So what would that pull in the market look like? Next slide, please. So I would really encourage you to set a clear policy and publish it externally so that your vendors know that this is what you're going to be doing. You need, as Joanne said, to have a dialogue with vendors, both existing and potential, and explain your goals and how they can contribute to their goals. Many businesses today don't think that they're expected to contribute to poverty reduction or circularity, and yet they're perfectly poised to do that. Why wouldn't they be? Using total cost of ownership, and be careful of the tools you pick to do that with, really helps you show the full value of what you're getting for best value. And I'd really encourage you to set expectations today. We know that the federal government is planning to have guidelines, say, on recycled content plastics by the end of next year, but that's too long. We don't have time to wait that long. Just get doing something. Start with some low requirements and say that you're going to be increasing, and then offer higher points for people who are able to put, say, more post-consumer recycled plastics in there. And I've got a little note there to watch for greenwashing. That might come up in the conversation as we have a discussion, but greenwashing is an important thing and something you should all learn a little about, and I'm happy to come back and talk some more about that if we need to in another session. Next slide, please. So I have some basic questions as asked to give you some examples. So providing TCO, your vendors should be able to do that. Eco-labels are a really good baseline, but they're a baseline. They're not going to give you the market movement that you need and want. But scoring higher for better ratings. EPEAT's a good one for electronics, and you can buy bronze, silver, or gold. I'd really encourage you to give higher points for higher ratings. Identify how this service or product assists you in meeting your sustainability goals. Ask the vendor to do the hard work for you. How can what they do assist you in meeting your goals? Ask your vendor to be transparent. We have print vendors who do not disclose their impact on forests. How is that? How can that be? EcoVadis is another one that you can ask for as well, leveraging other people's sustainability ratings, basically. We want organizations to be really working on carbon to address the climate catastrophe. And so not just in the products that you're buying, but how is the companies themselves going upstream into their supply chain? And have they got goals to reduce in those areas? Have they set a science-based target? Very important in today's climate carbon constrained world, I would say. And then obviously their last one on plastics, which we've already mentioned. Next slide, please. Just going to give you a few resources. There's a buying responsibly guide that we worked with WWF Canada to produce. I'm actively updating HP Sustainable IT Purchasing Guide, and no surprise there as we start to include things like human rights and privacy into these guidances. It becomes a bigger document, so I apologize for that, but that should be ready within a month. And I'd just like to do a little shout out for a small but mighty nonprofit called Green Economy Canada. I think if we go to the next slide, yeah. We're currently running a sustainable IT procurement pilot with 8 of their members who are higher education and municipalities. And one of the things we've done is we've produced a self-assessment tool. It's a quick half-hour tool to just assess how your IT procurement is. It's a draft today, so I'd really encourage you to take a look at it. We would love for you to help us do a better job on this. Send me all of your feedback. Sustainability is a team sport. We need everybody's input, and we've gotten this draft together, but we would really like some feedback from you guys. So I'll leave you with the last slide that talks, as Dave Packard said, it's not just Francis's job, it is all of ours job, and we need to get moving on it pretty damn fast. Thank you. I'll hand it over.
Thank you so much, Francis. Always learn something new, even if I've seen your PowerPoint presentations, always pushing the needle forward. So thank you for that. We have lots of time for questions for all 3 of the presenters, but it struck me, there's this fundamental gap, I guess, where ICT as a category has been really an industry that's a race to the bottom industry. Everybody wants to be the cheapest, and as you say, consumers are really responding to the price tag more so than anything else. But how do you, in addition to being, racing with your competitors to the bottom, and also this idea of planned obsolescence, which has been, a critical aspect of ICT previously. I mean, how does HP sort of wrestle with that as it transitions towards its circular models and still keeping competitive?
That's a great question, isn't it? And whilst I would think that we do a lot of this because we're a purpose-driven company, and we know as individuals, we were starting work on making plastic circular 18 years ago, like that was before anybody was thinking about this stuff, because we had an engineer who literally sat and said, we're already taking this stuff back. What if we could do something better with it? So I think we know what the right thing to do is, and we've been steadily working on it, getting the baselines going. It's true, sometimes you have to compete, which is why we're not circular yet. It's a journey, right? We know we're still working in a linear economy to the most part. So what we can do is we can keep laying the products and the services and products out for our customers, but the procurement is the key piece here. That's why I'm so delighted to be talking today, because we need to collaborate with our buyers so that they can drive the market more. And I talk a little bit about that 30% goal. I know we could do more. We know we could do more, but we can't be too far out of step with our competition, because then we become much more expensive, especially with the virgin plastic prices being so low. So we need to be a leader. We always have been and want to be, and then we'll see the rest of the market step up as the procurement requirements come in, and then we can do more. So it's kind of a stepwise thing. That's the way I see it.
Appreciate that. And before I head on to Eric, can you just really quickly talk about what TCO is, total cost of ownership? It's a term that's been starting to be almost replace life cycle analysis, but not everybody understands maybe the concepts or how to measure TCO. Very, very quickly, if you wouldn't mind.
Right, and it's a bit confusing because there is actually an eco label called TCO certified, so which is used for PCs and displays and a few other things, so not to confuse with that. So total cost of ownership is really, I think the most common term that procurement people would use is best value. What you're trying to do is count in some of those other costs that typically don't get measured, and potentially because they're harder to measure, into the front-end purchase price. So energy use is a basic one. That's a no-brainer. But repair costs, replacement costs, and certainly the end of first life cost, which can be significant if you're thinking about data privacy for large organizations. And every business today has to worry about data privacy. And so, it's still staggering to me that we have organizations not thinking about that in their procurement vehicles, and then particularly end of first life. So it's trying to get your hands around what are the total costs. And I think an example that many people have gotten their heads around is vehicle purchases. They're used to counting that cost of buying gas into the cost of the vehicle, so they'd either get a hybrid or even an electric vehicle. So that's the comparison I would use to make it simple for people.
That's very, very helpful. Thanks.
There is a lot of different calculators out there. I know we're doing some work with ECPAR on finding a better tool, but even just starting to count the basics in would be better than nothing today.
Very helpful. Thank you for that, Francis. Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Pothion. Eric with Philips has been working in the healthcare industry for 22 years, gaining experience and expertise in markets across Europe and North America. In 2015, Eric made his way to Philips Canada as a senior marketing manager, where he supports the entire healthcare systems portfolio. He specializes in digital marketing and launched a new healthcare products and solutions in the Canadian market. He's also eager to share his passion for sustainability and a transition to a circular economy. And as Philips Sustainability Ambassador, he leads initiatives and partnerships to achieve Philips' ambitious environmental and social objectives, which he will talk more about today. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Joanne. Hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Recycling Council of Ontario for organizing this webcast. And then I'm glad to be with you on behalf of Philips and share our circular economy approach. I will give you some context of our sustainability strategy first, and then we'll focus on circular economy. Next slide, please. Philips' purpose is to improve people's life and make the world healthier and more sustainable. So, this is quite admirable, but it's bringing also many interesting challenges from an innovation strategy perspective. From an employee perspective, it's very inspiring to work for such a purpose-driven company, especially when you know that healthcare systems account for 4% of global CO2 emissions, which is more than the aviation or the shipping industry. It means that as a company, we have a big responsibility towards the society. The good thing is that we believe that we have a great strategy to fulfill this responsibility. And it's been recognized externally as well. A few weeks ago, you probably saw in the Wall Street Journal, they published the list of the 100 most sustainably managed companies in the world, and Philips ranked number 2. So when you know that the analysts assessed over 5,500 publicly traded companies, and that the scores reflect the effects that the company's initiatives will have on the planet and the people, I think it's very inspiring again. Next slide, please. Almost at the same time as the Wall Street Journal publication, Philips announced their new approach to doing business more responsibly and sustainably until 2025. As Francis mentioned, it's very close. And so the execution of this strategy, historically for our company, was driven mainly by an environmental approach. And now it's going to be based on key commitments across 3 dimensions. So environmental, social, and corporate governance, ESG. And so this new structure includes ambitious targets, again, and detailed plans of action aligned with the United Nations SDGs, mostly 3, 12, 13, and even 17. From my own perspective, I think that this foundation is a key component of the company's success, because it's bringing a clear structure to achieve our purpose at all levels. Another key component as well for a company such as Philips is the global leadership team engagement. They are the ones driving the efforts, and they lead by example. So it's very important for the whole company and the whole success of this transition. Next slide, please. So obviously, I don't have time to detail all the objectives, the targets. But if we focus today only on circular economy, you can see that initiatives are following three main axes: sales, install base, and sites. So I will get back to sales a bit later, and I would like to stop for a minute on the install base and the sites. As mentioned previously, it's crucial that we take responsibility for the equipment that we put on the market. Francis mentioned it many times, in many examples for HP, but for us, it's exactly the same. And also it's increasing our credibility towards our customers, toward the society. And it's offering new touch points as well with our customers. Our goal is to leverage the experience that we gained with large equipment to offer a trade-in on the whole medical portfolio, and take care of repurposing them, in a responsible way. Sorry. We are also working on circularity with all our major sites, production plants, and offices. I spoke to one of my colleagues last week, and his feedback was very positive and very inspiring again, because he was explaining that they've reached the stage where they eliminate the concept of waste by always considering an alternative, either reuse, donate, repurpose, reduce. So it's very cool. It's important to note as well that we have key enablers to support this. One of them is designing 100% of our new products in line with eco-design requirements, which means that they will be totally circular. Next slide, please. So first, why is it so important for a company such as Philips to move into circular economy? Well, I already mentioned, our purpose and our responsibility towards the planet and the society. We all agree that the linear approach is not sustainable, as we see, some consequences on this slide. In a circular economy, productive loops maintain value while minimizing waste, and the extraction of finite resources results, as we've been talking since the beginning of this webinar. But apart from this, we are also embracing new trends and patterns. For example, advances in digital technologies support more efficient use of resources, as well as effective collaboration and transparency. As a result, products are better utilized, and materials can be effectively tracked and recaptured. We are then adapting to the emergence of a different type of consumer, who is driven by access and performance rather than ownership. Joanne mentioned Airbnb, for example. That's a good example. Lastly, there is a growing demand from our key stakeholders to take responsibilities. And so these key stakeholders are our investors, retailers, customers, consumers, and of course, employees. Each group is asking us for action. Next slide, please. So from a marketing perspective, this transition is bringing so many business opportunities. This is the approach I've decided to adopt to raise awareness and get the attention of my leadership team. Very often, sustainability is approached from an emotional perspective. So giving these examples is always a plus, and it helps. The platform for accelerating the circular economy, PACE, has identified a list of 7 value drivers, and these should be reminded all the time to companies leaders. Embracing circular economy helps increase business growth, increase cost savings, reduce risk, build trust, and engage and retain talents. I think that this last point is very often forgotten. But studies show that new generations are attracted by companies whose purpose aligns with their own purpose on sustainability. I have the chance to interview students every quarter for our internship position, and I can tell you that 90% of the time they ask me for details on Philips' sustainability strategy. So hence the importance of being transparent and living through it. And from a procurement perspective as well, I'm pretty sure that if you want to attract talent, it's going to be the same approach. Next slide, please. So let's get back to our targets and have a look at sales revenues, because it's impacting your job as a procurement. So by 2025, we aim to get 25% of them from circular products, solutions, and services. And by the way, I do apologize for these slides because it's very busy, but I wanted to show a few examples of circular revenues. So in Philips, we are developing solutions from the perspective of giving access to a service rather than the ownership of an asset. We mentioned that many times, but it helps capture new markets and also foster the development of new business models with our customers. So we are developing subscription models such as pay per scan, for example, for an MRI, or pay per patient for monitoring, pay per use for applications and portals, IT portals. We even offer now renting programs for consumers. In these cases, obviously, Philips commit to delivering a service 24/7. We install the equipment, we maintain it, we monitor the usage, we monitor the wear, of course, and then we repurpose it in a meaningful way only when it's the right time. So it gives freedom of mind to our customers. It also helps them with their sustainability commitments, and it gives us a lot of flexibility with the equipment's life. We also believe that digitalization is a key enabler to this transition. So we've been focusing on telehealth through remote services, developing and optimizing our digital platforms. So we design solutions that are remotely serviceable. And so instead of sending service engineers on site, to complete software installation, we achieve this remotely. Obviously, this saves time and money for both the hospitals and our company. And needless to say that it helps reduce our carbon footprints. Hardware gives a great source of revenue too. So, for example, refurbished products. When you think about it, there have been circular economy products for a long time. They've been delivering clear social and economic value. In fact, Philips' volumes of refurbished products have been growing significantly over the last 20 years. So we offer a choice of pre-owned systems that have been upgraded and quality tested according to a very strict and high standard process of remanufacturing. For example, our Diamond Select program makes medical equipment available at a lower cost, offering premium quality refurbished systems with full Philips warranty. So it gives care facilities a way to extend their resources within a restricted budget without compromising on quality and, of course, outcomes for their patients. So I think that these are amazing opportunities for procurement teams and consumers. Next slide, please. So to conclude, the transition to circularity is ineluctable, and it brings a wealth of opportunities. However, we still struggle to implement it. Why? Well, there are many reasons. Joanne and Francis mentioned some of them already, and I think the lack of partnership is one of them. It's a key driver on this economic model, and we will witness increasing collaboration between different stakeholders. A company such as HP or Philips can be an inspiring leader, but cannot change the face of the industry alone. So, for example, I was just mentioning the benefits of remanufactured products. Unfortunately, it seems that our healthcare customers are not attracted to them in Canada yet. I try to understand why public procurement, are not interested in them, and so we've done some assessments, and in public tenders where hospitals are replacing an old equipment, we see less than 5% of the tenders scoring on sustainability aspects, and around 1% that accept remanufactured products. So some provinces stipulate that they only want to buy new products. And so we checked if this is by law, but no, nothing is in the Canadian law mentioned that you have to purchase only equipment that is new. So the reason could be a lack of awareness of all the offers, that's out there. So it's up to us, I think, to educate and take care of this. But it could be also an old fear of, that remanufactured means lower quality and performance compared to new. So I think that in both cases, we need to educate stakeholders, and we can do this by working closer, with the public sector, for example. The public sector can regulate the market, encourage, and guide procurement by designing incentives. They can lead by example and act as a responsible buyer in the end. They also have a big job to educate the workforce of the future. And in the meantime, the private sector is available as a consultant, and can give input to design new policies and regulations. We can also lead the way and take actions and build coalitions and work with non-profit organization. I'm always thinking, about what if we could agree with our competitors, on closing the loop together, using common resources to build our reverse and recycling systems, use parts that we cannot repurpose to feed urban mines that could be managed by municipalities, for example. This could benefit other industries. It would obviously reduce costs for everyone, and would create jobs, and ultimately would benefit our planet. So we have a lot on our plates, but these are exciting times, and we can all support the efforts. So I'm now looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was fascinating. I'm shocked about your reality around the Canadian market and its disinterest in refurbishment, particularly that you've proven you've been able to do that in other jurisdictions. Obviously, education is going to be at the forefront of that. But is there some liability issue, you think, that because it's medical equipment, that if it's not new, there's this notion that in fact there's some kind of liability associated with refurbishment?
So I think it's we still have the image of the refurbished product, back in the 60s or 70s, and the lack of quality. So there could be this lack of awareness of the new processes that we put around remanufacturing. It's done very, very thoroughly. Also, as Francis mentioned, you can find everything on the market, and some companies out there can say, yeah, we manufacture, but we're not using the same standard of quality, for example. So some customers might have been taken or have had bad experiences. This could be this, but I think it's all about education and things that have been done, for the last, couple of decades. We've done it this way, so why change? If there's not an incentive, if there's not a push from the authorities, I think it's going to take a lot of. It's going to be longer to achieve this.
Well, I have to also, before we move on to Greg, I wanted to congratulate you and Phillips. I've never heard a corporation making a commitment towards a portion of its revenues being derived from circular business. So congratulations. It's a very exciting milestone to set for your company. And we're very excited that, to support you being able to achieve that. So we'll make sure that we promote that. Congratulations. Excellent. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
So moving on to our last but not least today, Dr. Greg Lavery is the founder and managing director of Ripe Office, a circular economy office furniture remanufacturing business out of the United Kingdom. What led him to become an ecopreneur was the idea that 300 tons of office furniture was lost to disposal every working day. So in 2014, Greg put his engineering background and PhD in sustainable building work together. And in doing so, he developed a production system to cost effectively remanufacture high quality unwanted furniture to as new condition and establish science-led approach to designing beautiful furniture. From his Ripe office in the northwest London, which I understand is very close to Wembley Stadium for those of us who know where that is. We welcome you from far. Thank you so much. Take it away, Dr. Lavery.
Thanks, Joanne. So what do we do? Let's start off with sort of how do we define the circular economy? If we could go to the first slide, please. Well, for us, circular economy is a series of steps that are genuinely circular. So first of all, we have to understand customers' requirements. We do that with free office design work and free audit, or we can work with your own designer. Then sourcing. Now, sourcing is really important. Where do you get your office furniture from? Well, we get our office furniture from a client's existing furniture that we can remanufacture, used furniture, and Joanne mentioned the 300 tons per day going to landfill, and a lot more is on the second-hand market. And by the way, right now there is, and there never has been a shortage. So this is really a demand issue rather than a supply issue. And we also design our own furniture that's sustainable, made by local social enterprises. For us, remanufacturing of that furniture is all about a quality controlled engineering process. And that's what we spend our time developing, and that's going very well. We do the remanufacturing work locally, create local jobs, and we preferentially employ long-term unemployed people with disabilities. That's all quality controlled. And then we transport and install within a client site. And what makes us actually circular is that we have a guaranteed take back on any furniture that we sell. And in fact, we wouldn't be a circular economy company if we didn't, right? And that means we can remanufacture that over and over again. And in fact, we make more and more money every time we remanufacture it, because the work that we do puts often higher quality powder coat on an item than might have originally been done when it was first made. So our revenue succeeds when we can source and remanufacture items around and around. But why does this matter? Well, if you wouldn't mind flicking to the second slide, if you look at the entire greenhouse gas footprint of a building over its entire life, and that includes columns, beams, foundations, digging a big hole, right through to demolishing, actually, your fit out and specifically furniture is 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions over the entire life of a building, for every bit of embodied greenhouse gas emission and the energy consumed. And that's because every 5 years or whatever the lease is, typically the model is, okay, we'll throw everything out, all the old furniture goes to landfill, and we'll buy brand new. That can be reduced by 80% through choosing remanufactured furniture, which is an automatic. And for those who, I've done the math, that's 24% of your entire building's footprint over its entire life. That's a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions. And then we talk with our friends Eric at Philips, then you can put your LED light bulbs in and start to really chip away at the operational energy to make some really important savings there in greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So for us, we think about the different generations of remanufacturing. So the basic generation one of remanufacturing in office furniture is bringing an item back to its original condition. So let's call it as new. So it looks like new, it performs like new, it meets all the standards, etc., etc. When we do that, the cost is 20 to 30% lower than framework prices. So those are what you as professional procurement people will be achieving. And remember, what you're doing is effectively every day your job is to try and negotiate down the margin that's placed on something. Well, our starting place is lower than the cost to manufacture from virgin resources. So actually we can go much lower than framework prices. The second benefit is that 80% lower greenhouse gas emissions, plus there's local jobs, there's better scores for WELL and LEED and various other rating schemes for fit outs and offices. We offer the same warranty and large volumes are available. And you can see on the right hand side, if you buy new, there's no take back, all the jobs are overseas, all the profits are overseas. And even if a chair is, in inverted commas, manufactured in Canada, or wherever you are sitting right now, often that's really only local assembly of parts that have been made in the eastern nations at a very low cost with local jobs there. Next slide, please. The second generation that we think about. So here's an example of a chair. This is one of the best selling. There's 1.5 million of these chairs been sold in Europe. And every year in the UK, roughly 50,000 of these end up coming out of offices and sadly going to landfill. That's called a G64 on the left-hand side, originally made by Gyroflex, those of you who may recognize it. For generation 2 chairs, what we do is we essentially what we call upcycle them. We actually make them better than they ever were in the first place. So what we've done for this particular chair is we've improved the ergonomics. It's got much better lumbar support. We've updated the styling by taking those curvy bits out on the left-hand side. And the long life components have been recovered and remanufactured. So what you get on the right-hand side is what we call a Ripe Zero task chair. That's offered at less than half the price of the original. It's got 100% recycled upholstery. There's no glue in that, so it scores well on WELL systems. And it's taken back to remanufacture by us for further lives. So that's an example of a sort of second generation. In our mind, let's call that the upcycling generation of furniture. And obviously we're doing thousands of these, right? So this is a pretty standard next generation. The third generation, next slide, please. The third generation is about taking bad products out of the system in the first place. So if you think about most desktops and tabletops, they're made from melamine faced chipboard or medium density fiberboard, both of which involve taking a forest, grinding it down to next to nothing and sticking it together with glues that are so nasty that actually it's not worth recycling because all you get is dust and there's no market for dust. And the glues make it pretty much unburnable because they're pretty awful glues. So instead of taking a forest, why don't you take a whole bunch of post-consumer plastic waste and stop it going to oceans and other unhelpful destinations and turn it into furniture? So that's what we're doing. So the one on the left-hand side is just the top on a Vitra frame, looks lovely. And there's a blow up there in the left-hand corner of the material. It's a combination of kitchen chopping boards and black bin bags, which are notoriously difficult to recycle. On the right-hand side, we've taken that same material and made the legs, and the top is made from post-consumer recycled yogurt pots. And you can see we even leave a little bit of tin foil and various things in there. So that's a real conversation piece, and is proving very popular for meeting rooms. And we call that a generation 3 because actually we're not just dealing with the rubbish or the waste. What we're dealing with is actually products that can be remanufactured very easily over and over again, and we're displacing a really environmentally poor product in the form of chipboard. So that's for us what sort of remanufacturing is all about in terms of the 3 generations. Next slide, please. And by the way, this isn't just happening in the furniture industry. We work with every day organizations who take recycled ceramic tiles, recycled ceiling tiles, recycled paint. And no, you don't scrape it off the wall, but the average statistic is that there's 7.5 tins of half-used paint under in everyone's packed shed. So there are organizations that do that. Reclaimed flooring, remanufactured raised flooring, remanufactured electronics. We have a sister company that remanufactures electronics in the same way that we do furniture, and even reused kitchens. So the question is, just how low can your footprint go if you're thinking about an office refurbishment or a new office space? And by the way, there's no compromise on quality with all of these because they're fantastic high quality nowadays, but they won't be offered to you by large manufacturers because they've often got a, let's say, vested interest in a linear economy. Whereas a lot of these products are offered by small companies who are doing something really innovative that have really taken a waste stream and turned it into something really very, very competitive with new, but at a smaller price point. Next slide, please. So in over 200 projects, we've saved clients millions because of the price point advantage. We've saved over 1 million kilograms of CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas emissions. We've avoided 400 tons of furniture going to waste, and we've provided 7,000 hours of paid work and training for local long-term unemployed people with disabilities. And that's a sort of real social sustainability benefit that really warms our hearts every day, and we think should be part of procurement, and it certainly is in parts of the UK like Wales. Next slide, please. And just to show you that this is not involving a compromise in quality, this is a project we did for JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, for their new Manchester headquarters. Next slide, thanks. This is the UK Green Building Council's headquarters. 100% of the furniture and materials there is remanufactured. Next slide, thanks. A cafe that we did with ex-Facebook and other remanufactured furniture, again, 100% recycled furniture and a lot of use of recycled plastic surfaces and reclaimed ceramic tiles around the bar there. Next slide, thanks. Public Health Wales, a part of the National Health Service. This was a building we did with 94% remanufactured furniture. Next slide, please. And this is BP Chargemaster, which is part of the new BP emphasis on more sustainable businesses. 100% of the furniture in this facility is remanufactured and reused. Next slide, thanks. So let's get to the topic then. Actual circular economy furniture procurement. Well, there's a few things that we've observed in terms of best practices. First of all, use market testing. Now, there is obviously an information asymmetry at the moment. There are companies out there who can offer circular economy solutions, but you might not know about those. I mean, obviously what you don't want to do is write a tender for a market that can't deliver that. So what we've found and participated in ourselves is some very successful market testing phases prior to writing a tender or renewing a framework that actually says, right, hey, everyone, we're going to have a get together, put it out through your networks. We're having a get together of a particular category. We want to see what the most sustainable options are out there. Let the attendees present what they're doing, learn about what they're doing, and what that will enable you to do is check your ambitions can be met. And by the way, you might be very surprised. Most of you may not have known about circular paint or many of those other aspects that I just outlined. And also, probably more importantly, enables you to shape the tender or the framework to make sure that you're not going to fail by being too ambitious or underly ambitious. There is an error by underestimating what the market deliver. The second best practice is separating in the furniture space the the build from the furniture procurement. Now, the design and build is becoming more and more popular because it's a sort of turnkey contract, just one contractor, but that has a number of problems. First of all, those design and build contractors are not furniture manufacturers at all. They're really just middlemen who'll do their best to sell you the worst quality furniture and make as much money out of that. So that's a major problem. Not only that, but also that doesn't enable them to maintain the furniture over many lives, and even during its first life, because a design and build contractor is really all about getting the walls up, getting their check, and moving on to the next project. Whereas if you work with someone who's genuinely a furniture manufacturer, or ideally a remanufacturer, they have a vested interest in working with you to make sure that furniture is maintained properly and that they take that back when you no longer require it for further remanufacturing, as we do. A third best practice is to include interior design with your circular furniture provision. So it's not just about the furniture, because what we all want is a beautiful office that is value for money with great ergonomics and great health benefits to that as well. In order to do that, allowing your supplier to create that beautiful office, incorporating remanufactured furniture, including, by the way, existing furniture you might have in that space or an adjacent space or even in a storeroom, gives you some really big cost savings as well. And by the way, most interior designers are pretty much stuck in a linear mindset, driven by fast fashion influences, which are really a bad influence, and leaves you with a office full of furniture that, frankly, in 2 years or even a year will be out of date and look out of date. And that's not doing you a service at all for your offices. And the final best practice thing is around evaluation criteria. So we've spoken with a number of very large procurement systems within universities, government, and corporate world. And what we keep finding is that whilst there is a tender process that's very difficult to change, all of the procurement professionals, we ask, well, who sets the tender criteria? And they always go, well, either we do or the end user does. And frankly, that can be whatever people like, because that's about fitness for purpose. And so setting evaluation criteria is an immensely powerful opportunity to change what is procured by thinking differently about what's important. And whilst it's difficult to change the procurement processes, it's very easy to set up a wonderful set of evaluation criteria. And if we could go to the next slide, I'll show you what some of those are. And we've participated in a number of tenders. In fact, we've won most of them that take a more a triple bottom line approach to value, all of which create value, and in fact, all of which create economic value. But what they do with the right set of evaluation criteria is they capture pockets of economics, just like the TCO, or total cost of ownership, or life cycle analysis does. They capture pockets of value that wouldn't normally be achieved with a lowest cost tender style. And by the way, this means that actually, if you're capturing all of those forms of value, the bid sum is just one aspect of that value. So for example, Transport for Wales, which we won quite recently, weighted the bid price, i.e. the bottom line economic figure, as only 30% of the evaluation criteria. And where did the other 70% go? Well, it went on to things like this 8 points that I've included here. So percentage of of existing furniture to be used in the furniture provision, right? And if you don't do that, maybe you also include, well, what was the cost of disposal of the existing furniture? Because that's one and the same problem. In a circular world, we're solving that problem of what to do with old furniture. And therefore, percent use of existing furniture is a really valid criteria to assess a provider. Second example, what percentage of the furniture will be externally sourced and remanufactured? So guaranteeing that has a second life at least. And then once you're finished with it, frankly, we'll take it back for a third, fourth, fifth life, and many more. Thirdly, what are the embodied greenhouse gas emissions in the furniture that that your supplier will supply compared with furniture made from virgin resources? Fourthly, how will that help you to score well with WELL, LEED, and other credit systems? Fifthly, what will you do with the furniture when it's no longer required? Because otherwise, frankly, you're going to have to pay to have that disposed of. Sixthly, what sort of social value will you create as a supplier of office furniture? And we create local jobs and those furthest from the workforce. And of course, what you don't want to do is listen to forward-looking statements. You actually want to see the statistics and past history proving that. Seventhly, how do you intend to involve local and small businesses and social enterprise? And then finally, how much of your furniture was manufactured outside of the country, which obviously impacts on national balance of payments and local jobs and all those sorts of things. So these are some of the best practice evaluation criteria that we've seen out there. Next slide, thanks. So we're really happy to talk with organisations who are thinking about their procurement. No cost, just give us a call. We exist to change the world. We think office furniture is criminally negligent right now in terms of its environmental impacts. It's wickedly expensive and very much unnecessarily so, and it really doesn't create local jobs, and we think that's criminal as well. So we're hoping to change the world. Give us a call or drop us an email. Happy to have a conversation about your procurement. And please sign up to our newsletter via the QR code or our website, where we can help you to keep you abreast of what's going on in the circular economy around the office furniture segment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate that. Thanks for everybody else to come back and join. We've got a lot of questions that are starting to come in, but Greg, before I let you off the hook, those 8 criteria, I noted that there are a lot of very specific, and I think Frances mentioned this in her talk, that the buyer is really asking you as the seller to help them reach their goals. Tell us how you're going to help us achieve well or lead. Tell us how much embodied energy is part of this so that I can take credit of those carbon savings as a result of purchasing from you. I guess the first question is, how often are you seeing those, very laudable criteria, very, very progressive criteria? And are you starting to affect them as a supplier in educating the potential buyer, or is this coming from an external force? Where is that? Can you talk about, how these are starting to hit the marketplace?
Yeah, so there's a couple of levers for change that are occurring. So in 2015, the Welsh nation enacted the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which actually puts the emphasis on every single institution in Wales to think about how they can improve future generations. And that relates to carbon, jobs, economic prosperity, et cetera, right? So what's happened is in 2016, we did a very large project with the National Health Service, and I showed you one photo of that. And we were sort of overnight, that project won dozens of awards, and overnight we became the de facto solution for the well-being of future generations if you're thinking about furniture and office refurbishment. And so that word of mouth then, and obviously that was a wonderful project that was very heavily noticed around Wales. And so word of mouth got out, and we are contacted on a very frequent basis to say, hey, I've seen that. That seems like best practice. And we say, whoa, that's actually, the world's moved on, right? I talked about generation 2 and generation 3 remanufacturing. So we have these really interesting conversations, and then all of a sudden a tender pops up in our inbox saying, hey, you really should apply for this because we really like what you do. So that's how change is happening. But in England, less so, because the English are not that organized around thinking about circular economy. But in the corporate world, surprisingly, probably not surprisingly, given the net zero carbon targets that are emerging, what we're finding is that a lot of corporates are saying to their designers, get me low carbon solutions, because we've got a target in 2030, and we might be a property company or whatever. This is a big issue for us. It's a big part of our footprint. That pie chart then starts a conversation to say, okay, you're a property development company. What are you going to do about this? And by the way, if you're an architect, that pie chart's really empowering, because you can actually then pick how you're going to address your client's brief of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so that leads to a lot of conversations, and really the architectural and design community in England is really pushing this really hard and contacting us every day. And we have partnered up with probably a dozen of the leading architects and interior designers here who are our advocates. And every day they're calling us saying, hey, I've got this other project. Can you help us with X, Y, Z, right?
Excellent. That's great. Okay, I'm going to open up questions for the last few minutes that we actually had to everybody. to anybody who wants to sort of take this on, how are you starting to communicate to governments in particular? Because we're really, we all agree that public procurement has an enormous opportunity to actually, lead the conversation. Governments are built to advance their broader public objectives. So how are you starting to communicate with governments to inform their tenders, to have these engagement opportunities with vendors? Maybe Frances, you can start.
Sure, it's a little difficult because of what you alluded to, that separation of church and state, where professional buyers have often felt very uncomfortable talking with vendors. And I think we really have to address that one head on. We have to think about how can we do this in a way that makes buyers feel comfortable, that they're not breaking any of the rules or potentially compromising their upcoming RFPs. So your comment, Joanne, about doing it early, sooner the better, just to find out what the market's like. And I just want to give you a statistic that came from Dr. Diane Sachs this morning, just from an Ontario perspective. We've got 63 municipalities, 206 that have declared climate emergencies, 262 had climate-related language in their official plans, and 140 had included climate-related language in their zoning bylaws. We've got all of that data out there. How many of those organizations actually have anything on climate in their procurement documents? There's a disconnect here, and we can help fill it with carbon neutral solutions, with refurbished solutions. We all can step in and help.
Love it. Eric, anything from you in terms of how you talked about the healthcare sector, certainly your big client. In your capacity, how are you starting to educate potential buyers?
Yeah, so you got many. First of all, you have to educate your salespeople. I think it's very important because they have to really understand, embrace this culture. And I'm talking about culture because in Philips, I think it is really a culture. It needs to be a culture. Everybody should be, every one of us in Philips should become a sustainability ambassador. So that's the first thing. They have to believe in it. And then, doing marketing and communication, working with organizations like you and inviting the right people, at the table is very important. I think, it's part of the education. So that's the first step. Yeah, and showing the benefits. I think Francis gave us a lot of data. Data is very important to gather everybody around this.
It's a bit curious to me and sort of gobsmacking that each of you are able to actually articulate very succinct benefits to the actual business, and then translate that to your buyer, not only cost savings, but liability reductions and, all of these big loyalty and feeling good about what you're buying and contributing to an actual culture by taking action. Yet it's not really translating into, at a pace we'd like to see in a procurement function. Some of these buyers, especially government, they're big organizations, and you might get to talk to, a head department but you don't ever get to the procurement guy who's designing the criteria, or the lawyer who gets to, look at the agreements, or the evaluators that actually score your RFP responses when they come in. I guess just give some advice, starting with Greg, to governments. I mean, where do they start? Should this land at the feet of procurement? Is this a finance issue? Is this a leadership issue?
The answer is it doesn't matter. What we've found is individuals are incredibly powerful. If someone wants something to happen, they will figure out a way to make it happen. And that's what we spend all our day talking to, right? Someone will say, hey, my name's Terry. I'm the procurement guy for a whole council or a whole region or whatever. I really care about sustainability, and I really like what you do, and I want to bring the cost savings, environmental benefits, jobs, et cetera, to my community. How do I do that? And so my key message, I think, for everyone on this video conference is, you are incredibly empowered to make a difference. you've just got to want it badly enough. And imagine having recycled paint, ceiling tiles, flooring, everything. So the whole space is made with a footprint less than 20% of what it otherwise would be. You're going to win awards all over the place, right? And be a hero in your organization because you've changed things. And what more, that once you've done one, and even if it's a trial, that gives you the momentum to change your entire institution's procurement around whatever category you choose to focus on first. Please make it furniture, right? But the power of that individual is huge. So don't be afraid if you think you're just a small cog in a big system. It's individuals that make the change happen. And that's the advocates of a more sustainable solution in the circular economy are our greatest allies.
I got to jump in and just say, hallelujah, yes, that is exactly it. And just to shamelessly promote the Sustainable Procurement Award at the Clean 50, we have already sponsored that for 3 years in a row. So the upcoming awards will be out, and encourage you to start thinking about it. So we recognize that power of recognition for people. It's very important.
Right.
One more thing. We can jump on the opportunity. Next year there's going to be the World Circular Economy Forum, and it's going to be in Canada. So I think this will also emulate a lot of dynamics here in Canada. At least I'm expecting that.
Yes, and we are going to be leveraging all that attention on the Canadian context as well. No question. There's two more that I'm gonna try to squeeze in, even though we're over time. One's very specific, but I think it's incredibly important because in each of your contexts and what you sell, what your companies sell. So I'll read it verbatim. How do these programs take account toxic chemicals that may be found in materials? Greg, you talked about this a little bit in terms of end-of-life management and choosing formulating a different manufacturing a different material that address the glue issue. But there are things in ICT, flame retardants, and certainly in medical, you're all dealing with flame retardant issues, PFAs, heavy metals, those kinds of things that effectively render recycling either defunct, irresponsible if you try to do it, or just technically unable. So given your lines of business, how are you dealing with the chemical issues? And I know sometimes that government regulations sort of prevent you from applying any R&D, but maybe Frances, you can start us off.
Sure. Well, the great thing about circularity and designing for circularity is it makes you very unwilling to put those chemicals in unless you absolutely have to, right? That's the first thing. So not only does circularity have all those other benefits, but it actually forces brand owners to start thinking more carefully about that. And some were regulated in, and flame retardants is a great example. So right now we've had to figure out how to separate them out of mixed plastics. And we're investing in R&D to figure out what we can do with them. I think it would come back down to chemical recycling at some point. But it brings that bigger focus. Once you become circular, the less nasties you can have in there, the better it is, because then it becomes more circular. And kudos to Philips for having that goal setting on circularity, because then it will drive even more design to get rid of those chemicals. So.
Sure. Eric, in the health medical equipment.
Yes, yeah. So we, as Francis mentioned, we designed first of all the product so they are circular. But I think what we do is also working with recycling companies, and we have a charter with so all our the companies we are working with are following our charter and our processes. Otherwise, we're not working with them. So that's the way as well to make sure that we are repurposing effectively.
So you'll be able to trace the chemicals in the recycling processes if they're able to actually recycle them. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
If we cannot recycle them, well, they take care of that, but according to our standards.
Okay, I see. That's great. Okay, this is an easy one. It's 10 after 1, so you've all been gracious with your time and overtime, and I know you have other business today. So I'll leave the last word to Greg. Does Ripe Office provide products in Canada? There you go. You've found your first client. Somebody is dying.
Well, the answer is if there's enough demand, we will absolutely do that. We have a plan for world domination, which includes obviously the wonderful provinces of Canada. So if anyone's got a big enough demand, we'll absolutely prioritize Canada as the next market for ourselves.
Well, well, I can tell you that you'll get more attention from us. There's no doubt about that. So we've gone over time. You guys have been so generous with your time, and actually most of our participants have stayed along beyond the hour as well. So on behalf of the Circular Innovation Council and the RCO, I'd like to thank you very, very much for taking time to be with us. And we hope this is, of course, for Francis, we've known you forever, but for the other two as well, we'd love to expand our relationship with you and continue in our journey and in bringing circular procurement in a meaningful way to the Canadian context. For those of you who joined us today as participants, thank you very, very much. Your questions, if we didn't get to them, we apologize. There's lots of you, so we'll make sure that we're directed to the appropriate speaker or all of them, if the case might be. And please join us again in 2 weeks today exactly, for our next webinar on this series. I bid you all adieu, and please stay healthy and well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.